Hi everyone, welcome to lesson 26 on CSS margins. So we have a box model that we've been learning about, and remember in the middle we have our content area with a width and a height, border which is optional. Last lesson we learned about padding, which is the distance between the content and the border on the inner side of the border. And in this lesson we'll be learning about margin, which is the gap on the outer side of the border. So I've got the same data I had in the previous examples, heading, 2 paragraphs and 2 pictures. And so now we're going to see how we can apply margin to various items on the page. In terms of the CSS, we have under the flexible box subcategory various margin style sheets. The first one is the shorthand, and the other ones are individual margins. So the shorthand works the same way as the padding shorthand did, where you can specify 4 numbers, 3 numbers, 2 numbers, or 1 number. 4 numbers, remember, would work in a clockwise direction, starting from the top, then right, bottom, and left. 2 numbers would be, the first number would be the top and the bottom. The second number would be the left and the right. And if you use 1 number, it's all the way around the same. So I'm going to start by showing you these 2 pictures that are side by side. Theoretically, there should not be any gap between these 2 pictures currently, because by default there is no margin on pictures. So this gap is actually being caused by an interesting phenomenon. The way in which I typed up this code, I put each image one underneath each other, which ordinarily should not affect spacing in a document. But let's say, for example, we had 2 words next to each other in a paragraph. Hello, Ryan. But I typed them over 2 lines. If I had to look at that paragraph, do you notice the space between the 2 words? So by default it places 1 space between 2 items in a paragraph, and that is the reason why we are getting a space between these 2 pictures, just because of the way I typed it. If I type the images right next to each other within the same paragraph, that spacing disappears. So that's just an interesting thing to watch out for. If I do now want to control that space, I can use margin. So let's do this. I'm going to set a margin on all my images. So I'll just set a right margin of 10 pixels. So this will apply a right hand margin onto every single image in the document of 10 pixels. So that's 10 pixels there on the right. There's also 10 pixels on the right of this image, although we can't see it. If I introduce a third image, then that will be quite clear. Now you'll notice that there's also a built-in margin on the browser, all the way down the left hand side here. The reason we know that is because this text is not flush against the left of the browser. If I had to take that margin away, it will remove all the margins right around the box, including at the top. So watch carefully when I hit refresh what happens. Okay, the margin on the left disappeared. What's strange though is this gap seemed to remain the same. The reason for this is that the heading also has a built-in margin. So that's what that gap is over there. It's the margin of the heading. I find that these waste a lot of space, so what I'd like to do is actually remove the margin from the heading. A little trick in CSS, you can apply the same rule to multiple tags by comma separating those tags. So in this case we're going to remove the margin from both the body and the heading. Now this text is pretty flush against the top of the page. Might be nice to have a little bit of a margin. on the heading at the top. But too much of a margin, you waste a lot of space on the page. And so margins can be applied to anything that you place on the page, whether it's a table, picture, paragraph, or heading. This ends our lesson in working with margins.